Alrighty, welcome back. Last time around we had a pretty special blue homologation special. This week, or this time around, we've got exactly the same thing, but they couldn't be further apart. So last time we covered off the VK Group A SS Blue Meanie. We did a video on that, and there is some follow-up photos on the progress of that car on our Instagram. If you didn't see that video, I'll put a link up, I think it's that side, and then you guys can follow on that video and see what I'm talking about. But outside of that, we have been involved with this collection of cars now for a couple of weeks, and every single time we get delivered a car, they're absolutely magnificent. So it's very, very difficult to make time to make these videos because I've got to get through them so quickly and some other stuff we've got going on in the shop, but I just couldn't help myself when it comes to a car like this. It's super hyper ultra special, and I know I was flapping on a little bit about last time how the VK Blue Meanie is probably one of the most influential, which it certainly is, but what we've got this time, Dick Johnson special. Well, I say Dick Johnson special, but basically it is a Ford Grand Prix Turbo. So this is actually based off a Ford Falcon, for those locals who know what that is, and for anybody else watching in and around the globe. A Falcon is kind of a mainstay four-door sedan, large four-door sedan that was sold in Australia, which has now ceased production. So some of these Australian cars that we see through this series have now terminated production. They're no longer made here. So the really, really special ones like this one that we've got here today, they become more and more scarce and they become more and more valuable. Hence why people are now spending good money on what really is just the Falcon. But that couldn't be further from the truth. So the GP Turbo, or the Grand Prix Turbo as it's known, was a last-ditch attempt to get into ATCC by Dick Johnson, who was a racing team principal or a race car driver as well. So unfortunately at the time there was uncertainty around the supply of V8 engines for that series of racing, so all that was left to do was to turn to the six-cylinder. For the Australian viewers, obviously they know the potential of a Ford Turbo, so this is what we call before the Barra. So now we've obviously got the Barras that are making huge power out of a 4-litre double overhead cam with valve timing and all the rest of it. Massive factory turbos, and they make huge power. They make easy power and they make good power. But well and truly before any of that started, there was the likes of this. It's a one of 43 cars, so it's roughly known that it's about 43 cars that were produced. I think about 15 of them were non-turbo, and they were just kind of in the dress-up. There's a number of things that make this car absolutely staunch, and that's probably the only word to describe it. It is the most ultra staunch Ford Falcon you've ever seen in your life. It's got everything that's mega 80s. So what I love about this era was everybody was just going mad with turbo technology. It wasn't so much that turbo technology was new, but it was kind of in a position where it was viable for a lot of people. So a lot of people had already started messing with turbos decades before that, but it was really a big thing in the 80s. A lot of manufacturers went to turbocharging for power, and that has stayed since. So you don't need a huge displacement engine to make good power. You just put a turbo on it and you can increase imaginary displacement. But as the Aussies like to say, there's no replacement for displacement. What do you do when you got a big six? Put a turbo on it and you're going to make massive power. So that's exactly what this is. They basically, I'm not going to say strap the turbocharger to the side of the engine because there was a lot more that went into it, but it is quite, primitive in the way of turbocharging. It's not intercooled. It literally just comes straight off the turbo, which is of a decent size. I'm not entirely sure how big it is or what model turbo it is, but it is what even by today's standards would be a medium-sized turbo. Obviously, it still ran sort of that early EFI, so it was already in its own right a very avant-garde, technology to have in the 80s, and it made 190 kilowatts. So if you'd seen the other video on the Prix, the VK Blue Meanie, that was making around 192 kilowatts, and that was a 4.9 litre, built for racing type engine, and it had a cam and all the rest of it, and that was making about 192 kilowatts at the time. So roughly around the same sort of era. In fact, the Prix was a bit later. Eventually, what happened though was there was another car that was sourced for the racing team, and then eventually moved to the Sierra Cosworths that ended up dominating for a very, very long time thereafter. So, as everything else in the 80s that was a performance car or outlandish race car, it's got all of the bits that make it great. So, those exaggerated front chin spoilers, huge wheel arches, massive offset wheels in the back, huge amounts of dish, and of course a ducktail. What's a turbo car from the 80s if it doesn't have a ducktail? So, extra little bits and pieces that obviously made this car stand out. Even though there was, other variants that were available that looked quite aggressive, nothing came close to this. Super staunch, inches wider in the rear, inches wider in the front, You know, those bonnet vents that are on the front that look absolutely mega. All of the bits, the bright blue paint, which was spot on to the era. It had a shield interior, which is awesome. I've got some photos of that because I've covered that up now, because when the cars like this come in, I don't want to mess up the interior and things like that, so we wrap them up and put all the bits and pieces on it to make sure that they don't get dirty. You know, the super period mesh wheels with the massive dish, all of the serrated turbo stickers on every panel, serrated, you know, Grand Prix stickers as well. In the gold, it's just 100% ultra 80s, and it just looks so good. You know, having been around these cars as I was growing up, you know, you kind of just looked at them as your run-of-the-mill cars that were always everywhere, and slowly they became more scarce, and now, you know, they're ultra rare. And even standard ones, you know, S-Packs in this sort of shape, man, they're fetching big money. So it's really awesome, and it's such a privilege to have such a really special car here. So, you know, under 50 cars produced. We're talking, you know, definitely one of the rarest cars, if not the rarest car we've had through the shop. Yeah, but I thought I would take some time in the morning to show you guys this absolutely mega car. If you don't know anything about it, Google it and check it out, man. It's absolutely crazy that something like this existed in this small fraction of time in the history of Australian motorsport, that something like this needed to exist, and I'm so glad that it does, because there's nothing quite like it. So even from the rear end, as you can see, I mean, it's just absolutely mental. Like, it's nice to see that not everything was about V8s and everything, and that was already starting to, I'm not going to say fade away, because V8 stayed strong for many years thereafter, but it was good to see the emerging turbo technology from big manufacturers like Ford, because at the time they really didn't have anything that was, you know, big six with a turbo on it. And now, you know, probably the greatest legacy that Ford will leave behind is the late model turbo XR6s, G6Es and all the rest of it, and everybody wants to get their hands on them, and for good reason. So this is, you know, before the Barra. It's awesome. It's nice to see something like this in the shop, so I thought I'd share it with you guys. So I thought I'd just do a quick video so you guys could check it out. Thanks again for joining me for the videos. I've got to get stuck in, and I've got to clean this thing up. So thanks again for joining for the videos. I appreciate you guys. Thanks for all that have commented, liked, shared and subscribed and all the rest of it. I appreciate you very much. Thank you very much, and I'll have a new video with the next car coming soon.